right, so it's going now. Uh, so we're gonna talk about the idea that we shouldn't be communicating or engaging with modern events, and then also we shouldn't have and then the paper about unscientificness from both the left and the right, conservatives and liberals, right?
Well, so yeah, so what I would say though is it's not about not engaging with current ideas because or current events
Mm-hmm.
because to some extent you have to, right? You can't just live in a conceptual reality.
Right.
But the idea is to not focus your energies only on the immediate, right? You kind of it's kind of the criticism of being a reactionary, right? If all you do is react to what's going on, you're always making the second move, right? You're always only responding to what someone else is doing, and they determine what the schedule is now, right?
And they
Um,
they they own the game because they're dictating the pace
yeah.
of it. Yeah, that
Well,
makes
yeah, they're
sense.
dictating the pace and ultimately the rules. Um, so what you ultimately want is to consider things within a larger, longer term context, which is difficult for people to do. It's and I am not even saying that in the sense that like some of us can do it. I think we're all a little bit screwed when it comes to trying to think of things that last longer than I don't know a decade, a few decades even, um, because there's kind of too much to take into account if you're trying to be predictive, which is why the goal is just to have the plan, right? And you wanted to touch on Marcus Aurelius a little bit. That's kind of his philosophy as well. When you look at his idea of like um, you plan for the worst and you hope for the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. But what I was getting at more was the idea that the focusing on the temporal, like the current events, right, is very much a negative in your opinion.
Well,
And in one, no, I don't disagree with it entirely. I think that
sure.
the idea that we solely focus on what is instead of what we want is very bad. Like I don't necessarily believe in the whole. I don't believe in the whole self actualization bullshit. But if you don't look at what what your goal is and like what your overall goal is, including like for society, for yourself, for all of that, then you're never going to make any progress.
I think it depends on what you mean when you say self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can. There's definitely a level of self improvement that you can get to where you begin to move through the necessary changes in a uh, more effective way. Whereas if you and I think a lot of people don't take the time to try to improve themselves in this manner, right? It becomes purely reactionary. They just hop on to an existing movement or trend. And then when that thing is gone, they don't really have any ability to to change with their circumstances. There's not really a self because they've tied themselves into this very temporary thing. Um,
Well, what I meant by the self actualization thing is people misinterpreting both the I think therefore I am and the the quantum physics thing, like something changes based on this observation into thinking that it is what we want it to be is how the universe reacts to us. And also what I think I am is what I become. Like those two misinterpretations are what I'm really focusing on. Is talking about the self actualization thing. I don't think.
because I was gonna say like in the hierarchy of need sense, it's simply sort of what you take care of after your lesser needs are met,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's your like higher purpose.
Right,
And
but
and then
I'm talking about like but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the very like hippy dippy, we need to do X, um, or you need to think a certain way in order to achieve your goals. Like the give money to God and God will provide. That sort of
well, I
thing.
mean, you do actually have to think of a certain way to achieve your goals, though.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying
Sure,
that like that
people can
the
be
yeah.
people can be wrong about the way in which you do it, but that thing is fundamentally true.
Right, and yeah, so that's what I'm saying is like that the like you needing to focus on what you want and achieving the things that you want is good, but it's not the same thing as the people who are like, ah, you're positive mojo, and send your vision out into the your vision and that energy out into the universe, and you'll be able to achieve those goals because you sent out that correct energy like
I mean,
that.
I've genuinely never heard anybody refer to that as self actualization, but I don't know,
Yeah, no,
maybe that's just
I may be using the wrong word, but like but like that sort of mumbo jumbo, like sort of thing. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head
fair
now,
enough.
but that's what I mean when I was talking. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't believe in that stuff, but I still think, like you committing to a thing and like striving forward to commit to that thing is very important for both yourself and those around you.
Yeah. But yeah, I think ultimately what ends up happening with this notion of like we have to react to the things that are happening now is I find that people just get stuck in these circles, right? These cycles of thinking, um, and it's very difficult as well. The way that ultimately the way that the propaganda machine at this point runs is that if you throw out enough data, it doesn't even have to be good data. You just throw out as much data as you can, and then it becomes impossible to kind of sift through what is true and what isn't, right? And it becomes impossible as well to figure out unless you've archived it, unless you've saved it somewhere, you've written it down, what was supposed to have been true yesterday, right? It's very easy to try to look up old information and only get the latest in the news cycle for your results because they're the most clicked on results, and even the stuff that used to be a good archive, maybe they stopped paying for the website, maybe it got shut down, um, whatever it may be. That information can be edited, can be removed, and can be covered up by yet more information. It's one of my concerns, actually, even as we go into an era where censorship becomes largely infeasible, where we're now working on, potentially working on platforms that allow you to host data across multiple machines. So there's no longer one specific host, and there's no longer really a way to get rid of it unless you remove every host. Um, so I mean, kind of like how the whole uh, uh, like Mariah Carey or whatever those pictures that people were spreading around, kind of like how that works, but it's just a fundamental function of the platform being used. And I think that the trouble there will still be that even when you save document X that proves once and for all that this thing was true, um, you're gonna have like 80 different edited versions of document X and document Y's and document Z's that all cover the same topic. And now somebody has to sift through 4,000 pages of data in order to figure out, oh, this is the one that I was referring to before, assuming they even remember what that was.
Right. Yeah. And the other, but the other thing too is that, like when you're talking about, uh, like more, current event type thing, right? Uh, Whether or not it's true or not really doesn't matter in the moment, unfortunately. Like the trueness of a thing and the truthfulness of a thing is very irrelevant to the overall existence of that thing and the impact of that thing, the impact that that thing might have.
Well, what I would say is ultimately the truth of a thing does matter to the extent that if you find yourself acting uh, out of accordance with reality, you will have a very painful awakening, right? But there's definitely a concerted effort to keep people from being able to establish what is true and what isn't, because in doing so you're keeping people from being able to make any kind of effective move.
Right. Well, that and depending on like what, like the very idea of what is truth, like that very metaphysical like pursuit is basically scoffed at. Like you we know what facts are, right?
Yeah.
And we know what we know what we know what the ideas want to accomplish that like different people have, but the idea that there is a truth is basically scoffed at.
Yeah, which it that's has never made any sense to me, because obviously, if you are trying to measure a thing, it can be better at the thing you're measuring or worse at the thing you're measuring. So unless you're going to say like have no values whatsoever, in which case why are you here?
Mm.
Um, then you necessarily return to a point where you must have some kind of method of evaluation, and then that ultimately is going to determine what the correct answer is. And you could try to argue for multiple simultaneous systems of evaluation, but I think ultimately, uh, again, we have that conflict with reality. Eventually, one of those systems, or more, possibly all but one of those systems, is going to get wiped out at one point or another, because it's maybe not totally wrong, but just wrong enough.
Right. Yeah, and but yeah, the pursuit of finding what that truth is the thing that is missing from the equations that people are going for when they're looking at perhaps factual data. So the thing that I really hate about the modern press is that they don't care about how how the fact like they care more about how the facts are received than what the actual facts are. So you
Well,
have
of course, because that's how they make money.
right, and if you have a person that doesn't agree with how the facts are presented, or they don't fit in the worldview that they want them to fit in, then they are dismissed as untrue. Uh, and the discomfort of what might be true is very much a big concern from a big concern for society. I think like the dismissing of what is true is a big
Well,
concern for me.
so I really what it boils down to is you have to look at what everybody's motives are, because like if you really want to delve into the current, right? Ultimately, it's a bunch of political games, and this is kind of why I I just wash my hands of the thing for the most part. So like, if you're a news organization, right, your valuation of your company isn't based on you producing any real product. The average like newspaper reader gives you nothing, right? The ad sense money is nothing. The subscription is like kind of relevant, but not really. It's more of a visualization of the amount of reach that you have. Um, the clicks only matter because there are people out there who will apply value to your company based on those clicks, right? So if somebody thinks that your blog is going to make them a lot of money if they advertise on your blog, or if they buy your blog and then force you to write whatever articles they want, that is going to drive the value of your business overall. um, the actual articles themselves, like just in and of themselves, if you were to put them on some other site, it's not like those are necessarily going to bring that site any value. Because even then, like some of these sites, like people hate the articles that are on there, but they click on the site because of the site's reputation. It's sort of this almost a self fulfilling prophecy kind of deal. Um, so their whole game is just to get eyeballs on their page, and be seen as something influential. Um, and so they only really have power insofar as you give them power. CNN. I mean, definitely there are people at CNN who will go out of their way to try to make your life hellish, and that's something to be concerned about to an extent. Like that they'll try to dox people and just like creep outside of your house showing footage of it and so on and so forth. But like unless the eye of Sauron is on you, there's really nothing that CNN is going to do that can really affect you personally. Um, and really your apathy towards them is probably more harmful than anything else you could do.
Harmful to the organizations. The apathy is worse. You mean?
Yeah, so all of these organizations, CNN and all of them, right? All these media organizations, your apathy is more damaging to them. I think short of you causing a boycott, there's very little that you can do that does more damage on an individual level than simply not caring what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you care, you're clicking on the article, right? And if you don't care, you're giving them nothing. The only thing that's superior to that is if you convince other people to become apathetic, and that's really the only thing that you combined can do. Um, in the end, like if we look back at the whole GamerGate fiasco, right? They did cause advertisers to pull out of these different companies, and that did lose them a lot of money. But in the end, like Gawker's back because somebody went, oh, this is a valuable name,
Yeah, it's a
or
valuable brand.
yeah. So even then, they can still survive that, whereas they can't survive like nobody reading.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, actually, that like that conversation sort of brings us around actually to the conversation about the science denial across political divides article or paper that we read earlier.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that overall?
So, I know you had a lot of questions about it based on the methodology you seemed kind of okay with, but it was the questions that were asked specifically that you had concerns about. Is that right?
Well, that is a methodology problem.
Yeah, no, no, no. I'm saying like the methodology seemed documented except for that, which you had a problem with, I should say.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's probably more holes to poke in this line of thinking of like we're gonna line up uh, vague group A and vague group B, and we're
Mm,
gonna ask them questions based on what we assume their position is, and then we're gonna label their response based on how well they conform to the answer that we expect them to give,
mm,
based on I don't even know what research, right? Like the whole thing kind of falls apart at that point.
yeah,
The concept, like I was telling you last night, the concept is not unsound. That people are definitely more willing to accept information that conforms to their worldview. I think that's something that everybody kind of accepts to
yeah.
some extent. That's why you,
Everyone has a bias, and
yes,
they want the world to confirm the biases that they have.
yeah, that's why people who are concerned with getting the correct answer on something try to mitigate that aspect, right? And sometimes they'll overdo it a little bit, right? There's definitely that risk of going too far and trying to steelman the other position, and you end up giving it a few extra points it doesn't really have.
Mm.
But that's still probably preferable to just kind of ignoring it
Mm.
or brushing it off.
I'm looking right now. So I have the document itself on the screen, uh, and I'm looking for the hypothesis because it said that there's two hypotheses, and I'm looking for because I wanted the exact wording that they had for it. So the abstract keywords, asymmetrical and ideological motivation, current research, symmetrical ideological motivation, methodology, principles, uh, measures. Where's the hypotheses that they were testing? Because it said it was like a dual hypothesis that they were testing. One was whether or not they were the uh, participants would be more likely to um, uh, yeah, hypothesis one. Okay, the asymmetrical ideological motivation hypothesis, that is that conservatives are inclined to deny attitude inconsistent science more than liberals. Two, the symmetrical ideological motivation hypothesis, that is, that both liberals and conservatives are likely to deny evidence that counters their respective policy preferences, right? So I think the goal of the research, right, was to see whether or not it was an ideological thing, or basically if conservatives just denied um, denied science, right? Whether they
Right,
denied whether it
but
was
those
real.
are but ultimately the main problem is that those are they shouldn't be vague positions, but they are vague positions within a modern context.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other problem is the the again the questions aren't up there, so there's no accounting for the validity of the questions being asked, right? If I go what's if I ask you a question about guns, and I'm working off the understanding that like assault weapon is a real category of gun, right? And that might be considered factual within a particular context of we're looking at legislation or something like that, right? Um, it might be that legislatively there's something that's being formed right now called assault weapon, but assault weapon is not like a functional thing that really exists. Um, and it also says nothing about again scenarios where the ideological. I say again, what we talked about briefly last night. Um, it says nothing to people who will still give a particular answer uh, because the ideology isn't relevant, right? So you can reject. If it turned out tomorrow that actually the defensive gun use thing is like totally wrong, and it's actually like the complete other way around. Like almost nobody defends themselves with guns, and basically everybody who draws a gun to defend themselves gets shot by the attacker, and it's actually really dangerous. Well, the point of the Second Amendment is not to defend your house from a robber with a gun necessarily. Like it's in there as per like the ability to defend oneself. But the goal is to be able to stop any foreign or domestic threat, like any foreign or domestic threat, which includes the state. And the whole goal there is to create a society that's able to fight against tyranny. So sure, you might fail against the minor tyranny of a dude in your house with a gun, or a dude in your house disarming you and taking your gun, but that doesn't
Or
negate
even
the other instances.
a local gang would be another example.
Sure, but it doesn't negate the larger scale issues for which that amendment was created, which is that the people can then unite and fight against tyrants, as we've seen in U.S. history specifically, like even past the formation of the country.
Well, the Athens, Georgia thing, right? Or not Athens, Georgia.
Athens, Tennessee.
Yeah, Athens, Tennessee, like Athens County. That was Athens County
Yeah,
War. Um, yeah, that in and of itself is another example of the citizens of the nation coming together against the tyrannical rule of, admittedly, a local government, but it was still a tyrannical rule of the government.
yeah. Well, and from what I understand of that scenario too, it's not simply that it was just like that county that was affected. It was like an entire region that was affected
Mm-hmm.
by this larger corruption scandal, and they sort of fought their branch of it, which is one of the reasons why those guys stayed quiet.
It was a democratic super, like not super state machine, basically, that got
Yeah,
out of control and took over it was like it was like a tri county government, basically, but the nucleus of power was the Athens County, like sheriff and stuff like that, that was really like expanding it out to try and convert it into a statewide thing.
so yeah, the thing is, right, is I think there's also kind of when you try to talk about these things as well, and this kind of moving into the prior topic of the modern context, it's very limiting because ultimately you're kind of just you can try to relate something to a modern context, but most people will just go, "What are you talking about?" Like, that's not. Uh, there's always that like whole thing where people try to suggest that because something's not exactly like something else, that they're not comparable, which I always find silly.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's
it's a ridiculous cop out basically.
well, it's self defeating. It's honestly like crippling to suggest that
Yeah.
something has to be directly analogous or it can't be compared. Like,
Right.
how are you supposed to analyze anything? How are you supposed to compare anything?
And well,
Right?
a great, honestly, the greatest analogy for the United States and the tyrannical policies that the United States has is Athens in ancient Greek, right? The the ancient Greek philosophers were very aware and very in favor of many of the modern, what would be called liberal philosophies, right? That were expounded upon during the Enlightenment, but they were still a tyrannical government, right? And they ruled with an iron fist against those that had um, any sort of resistance to their tyrannical rule. If they did not have the strength to, that's where the might makes right comes from. It's from the Greeks. Is
Well,
Yeah.
what I would say as well is I do feel like this is, and this kind of ties into topics. Um, there's this when you try to reframe things so that things aren't directly comparable unless they're exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to suggest that, like, and I'm not one of those like time is a flat disk people. There's definitely differences between historic eras, but it does obfuscate the fact that I don't know that we've necessarily changed as a species as much as we'd like to think that we have.
Yeah, I don't think so
Um,
either. I think
I
that
mean,
the founding fathers were as intelligent as we are. They weren't as developed as we are. Same thing with
well,
like in ancient times as well, probably.
I even think developed is kind of loaded, because like sure we have better technology,
That's what I
but
meant was technologically developed, but yeah.
sure, but yeah, I mean there's definitely aspects of the human condition in which we've regressed,
Possibly.
and
Yeah. I can see that.
and that prior civilizations definitely had a good hold on, um, and again, like, not perfect, but solved problems that we have today.
But the so I think one of the the conclusions of the study, right? The conclusions that were made in the study, just get circle back to the point here. Um, were so the findings, the authors received financial support. No, where's the conclusion? Yeah. So Arzers cast a new light on previously claims that conservatives are more skeptical of science than liberals, i.e., Money 2012 or e.g. Money 2012. Ideologically asymmetrical patterns of science denial don't hold up across different topics of scientific inquiry and don't hold up across political and apolitical context. We therefore conclude that psychological differences between conservatives and liberals as an explanation for science skepticism have most likely been overstated. See also this study, Sakita and Washburn, to 2016, to make us strong inferences about the role of political ideology in science reasoning. Future research should examine attitude consistency as a separate motivation apart from ideological ideology and examine scientific topics beyond those commonly discussed in the media, e.g., climate change, before making claims about funding differences between people to ascribe to different political belief systems. And I think like that's a pretty fair conclusion because they didn't say that they confirmed either hypothesis really. And I think this sort of speaks to the point that you were making is that the problem is that they saw was that much of the scientific boundaries or the opinions on scientific belief were catered to what is commonly shown in the nightly news basically, and whether or not that should be the measure or not is likely wrong. Like it likely should not be the measure. And like going forward, they're saying that in order for any reasonable conclusions to come, you have to expand the base of questioning to things that are not commonly talked about in the public.
Yeah, well, so I think there's definitely something to be said for um, expanding out the list of topics. I don't know that we necessarily needed a study to point that out, and B, point out that like no, it's not just a conservative quote unquote thing
Yeah, but
to
I think a study. It's good that a study exists to do that because I know a lot of liberals that really do just the think that the conservatives just don't understand science basically or don't believe in science.
well, yeah, but how much is this one study going to change their mind?
Probably not going to change a ton, I
Right,
suppose. Yeah.
and even if you were to come up with 10 of these, it probably wouldn't change their mind because it's not about uh, uh, them attempting to get I don't think at least that is, and if someone were to genuinely believe this and it's part of their attempt at understanding the world better, then I would love to disabuse them of that notion. But I think for most of these people, it's not that sincere. It's just a cynical attempt to put down people who disagree with them. And I think again, that's a tendency that we all have. It's very easy to mock your opposition, particularly when you haven't bothered to research their points. Um, and that's also why if you're going to talk about studies that are a little interesting, any of the studies that suggest that like conservatives have a better handle on liberal positions than the opposite, those are always funny to me. Again, it's the same sort of deal where it's like, okay, what are you defining as A and what are you defining as B, and how are you determining like which positions are you talking about? It's a little bit of a gross oversimplification of like a variety. Like it's almost like what would be a good example? It almost feels like trying to give someone a an analysis of like the entire market based on like two stocks.
Say again. What do you mean?
It's almost like it's someone trying to give like a full market analysis. Like this is where this country is at in all fields at all in all places at all times, and here are two stocks that I own that will prove this. Right? Like there's two positions that they're talking about that aren't even necessarily like. Sometimes they'll list their criteria. Often they don't. They just assume that you assume the same thing is liberal that they do, right? I mean, liberal in all of these cases is used to just refer to people who are on like the anywhere from like social democrat and neoliberal, which are already two different positions, to like full blown communist, and it's like that's not one position, and it's not even like one category. It's
I
like
think neolib neocon are pretty common, are pretty much the establishment of conservative liberalism now, in the United States. Like the neocon neolib positions are pretty common. The the predominant like ideological drives, which is why people call it a mono party because the goals are very closely aligned. But
well, what we can also look at there is like how much of the country does that actually take up. But I think more important than getting involved in all of that, because ultimately that's its own self defeating little game,
mhm.
is to kind of just look at the principles that you want to focus on and live out. And I think there's a definite need in that regard to live by example. When people see around them only people doing the same things that they're doing and getting about the same results, or even sometimes getting really good results, because um, uh, you can have a lot of bad habits and a very messy life, but if you've got say musical talent, or if you're good at sports, or you made an OnlyFans, then sometimes you can get by anyway. Uh,
you can have economic success for sure.
sure, but that's one of the only like that's the easiest thing to measure, right?
Hmm.
Like happiness you can lie about, but money you can't.
I don't
It's
know.
there, it's not.
I think one of the prime like one of the primary things that has really affected me recently is that I have economic success, right?
Sure.
Um, and it's fine and all, but like it's not enough. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing. There's even if I'm happy, I'm not fulfilled in my life in any way, shape,
Oh,
or form.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
and I'm not saying that it is the be all end all. It's just an easy measurement, and so it's one that people will default to, right?
oh, no,
It
that's fine, but that's what I'm saying. That like back to the previous point though about people looking at surface level indicators rather than looking at, you know, what is happiness. Like the that like that whole thing is very much been put to the wayside for lies, right? Like we as a generation have been lied to about both what economic success is and that economic success is what will bring happiness.
well, okay, so I think part of this is also just kind of what you're getting at. It's the perceptions that people have. For instance, like really what I'm talking about when I say leading by example is I think there needs to be more instances of people openly supporting, even maybe in a more hardline way, to be honest, um, uh, the habits and values that will create a happy life. Not even necessarily a stable life, because you can't really sell stability. It doesn't really work. Um, but the so like for instance the whole incel thing, right? You've got entire communities of people who are convinced that like uh, marriage is a trap, dating is a trap, and part of it is just that they get flooded with all of these stories, and sometimes from the news, sometimes from other people that they know, and they're all, or I would say probably most of them are true stories because these
Mm-hmm.
things do tend to happen. That
Yeah,
like marriages break up, and some people are just absolutely psycho, terrible people, um, and they'll ruin your life, right? That's definitely a risk. That's absolutely a risk. So is crossing the street. That is also a risk, and
yeah.
it's one that you take every day, right? And so there is you can live your entire life being afraid to cross the street, and you can stick to one block, and you can order all your food in online, and you can live in your concrete island in the middle of your city, but you're probably going to
And you
have
might even be financially successful doing that.
you might even be financially successful doing that, but you are going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I mean. Is like there needs to be a easy to follow path that is like this is the basics, and if you do this, you'll at least be okay.
Right.
Not necessarily like you'll be immune to a natural
Yeah.
disaster, but assuming everything goes on as it does now, you'll probably be all right.
Yeah. There's two things there that I find interesting as well from a modern perspective. Is one, the crossing the street's dangerous, right? That whole thing, and the idea that men and boys in particular have basically been shunned from any risky behavior, um, and the idea that boys will be boys has been used. It has been is basically a war cry of what we shouldn't have, right? When in actuality, men and boys should be boys. Like they should pursue these very risky things. Not all the time, obviously. Like there should be some maturity, like to come in restraint and for restraint, and there should be a feminine influence to restrain them as well. Um, but it's not it is our in our I don't know if it's not our biological imperative so much, but it's our need as as our function in a species to be the risk takers.
I would go so far as to say it's a biological imperative. I mean, if you're living in a tribe and you have predators that are out to get you, and you have animals that you need to kill to feed your tribe. You definitely want to send the people for whom you need fewer to reproduce than
Hmm.
the ones that are vulnerable for 9 months and can only carry one individual's offspring,
Hmm.
right? And that's why you get stuff like the polygamy thing, right? In areas where you lose a lot of men due to war or whatever else,
Famine.
um, it becomes advantageous then to have the remaining men take on multiple wives so that you build your numbers back up faster.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
otherwise, only some of those women win out in the reproductive game, and the rest do not. And while that might be advantageous in some respects, like you might eliminate some genetic lines that are maybe disadvantageous. Get a little bit of that naturally occurring eugenics in there.
Well, yeah,
But
the current paradigm right now is very advantageous for conservatives.
somewhat. I would say that if you're willing to decouple yourself from modern society, then there's an advantage. Um,
Fair enough.
and I'd say that there's niches within modern society that also work, but there's also the circumstance whereby like you're on your way up and you say the wrong thing and you lose your job, and hopefully you can get enough attention on like social media, which also doesn't want you there, to have people fund your way back up.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing that I find interesting in modern society is there's no real way for you to find redemption in
Well,
modern
and
society.
that's why you have to decouple yourself. I think, to be honest, and this is kind of what I think we're both building towards at this point. Is there has to be that last chain broken, and you
Yeah.
watch as the train goes off the cliff without you strapped to it. Um, but no, and I mean it even goes down to the ideological level, right? We were talking about stoicism and the notion that like uh, you know, if you ask people what stoic means now, and they'll argue with you like angrily. They'll get very aggressive about this in insisting that stoic means a different thing, right?
Hmm.
So to them, stoic just means you kill your ability to have and express any emotions whatsoever.
Exactly.
And yeah, like we both understand like obviously that the goal of the Stoics was that you have control over yourself, not that you kill any ability to have emotions, right? You're not a robot. You're just someone who's willing to stop and think rationally instead of throwing a tantrum.
Right.
But the tantrum now is deified.
Yeah. It's very true.
You can't have the society we have now. You can't have these interactions unless people kill off the notion that you are responsible for your own life and you're responsible for your conduct.
Well, not just your own life, but you're responsible. You are responsible for your own life, but you're also it's also needed that you are responsible for others, right? Like,
Well, we got to take baby steps, right? Like it's going to be difficult for people to take
uh,
care of a full family if they can't at all take care of themselves. And to some extent, the latter kicks the former into gear, right? You can no longer afford to to dick around if other people are depending on you, but there has to be some baseline of competence before you can even get to that point.
yeah. Well, not only does there need to be a baseline of confidence, there needs to be a baseline of competence, and like the baseline of
That's
competence.
what I said is competence.
Oh, I thought you said confidence. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. 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 There needs to be a baseline. I still think there needs to be a baseline of both, right? Like you need to have confidence and competent. You need to have a competent system that you're confident in, right? Like you can't just have a system of abstractions and like faffery as the basis for a society, which is what a lot of what we've done now.
Yeah, so then the real question is what do you do going forward, right? Because if you just sit here going, man, society really sucks, then you get nowhere, right? You as my grandmother always said, you wish in one hand and you shit in the other, and you see
You see
which
which
gets
one
filled
fills up
faster.
first, yeah.
Yeah. Um, you really have to have some kind of tangible plan and some kind of methodology going forward.
Yeah,
And some of that will involve things that you have to kind of get together, right? There's definitely certain things that I've got to get moving on and throw together, but yeah, there has to be some kind of framework.
yeah. All right. Well, I think that was a good conversation for the first one. Sort of established like the a good tone for what we're doing, and I
Yeah,
think we'll move on to another subject, different subject, next week. What do you say?
yeah, sounds good.
All right.